Hey guys, I hope y'all had a good weekend. So this is the video lesson that I was telling you about that we're going to have for this week. This is the first one. So basically, just a reminder of what's going to be happening this week. Every day, we're going to be starting off with a video lesson, okay, which will basically just be me walking you through what the activity is going to be and some of the key ideas that you're going to need to know for the activity. Okay, and then after that, so after we do the video lesson, you will have some kind of a worksheet or an activity to do. Again, that's based on the video lesson. After you're done with the worksheet or the last 10 minutes of the hour, the substitute is going to go ahead and play the solution video for you, which is just me walking through the worksheet or the activity and giving you the solutions, hopefully to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, and then today, the substitute is going to hand out to each one of you an extra credit worksheet. Okay, basically what this is it's something that you don't have to do. It is just extra credit, and you have all week to complete it. So if you decide to do it, it's not due until Friday. What I would recommend is that if any time throughout the week, if you finish these worksheets or activities early, that you go ahead and try the extra credit, since it's very similar to what we're doing in the activities. Okay, so that's going to be the basic layout of every day this week. Video lesson, then a worksheet or activity, and then a solution video. Okay, and like I said, if you have free time, go ahead and do the extra credit. So just a reminder about the things that you have to turn in every day. You'll need to turn in the notes from this video. You'll also need to turn in the worksheet, or if the activity had like a table or something that you had to make, you'll need to staple all those together and turn them in at the end of the day. You do need both of them in order to get credit. So you can't just turn in the worksheet and you can't just turn in the notes. You do need both. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So for review of the sine function, so we're going to be doing sine, cosine, and tangent, or applications of those three. So we'll start with the sine function, but before we do that, we're going to review our trig functions, and I believe we did this on Friday for some of you guys. So we did SOHCAHTOA, so we'll write that out. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So there's our SOHCAHTOA. And this just is an acronym that helps us, remember what each trig function stands for, which sides. So let's talk about sine for a second. And again, I think first hour we did some of this already, but we'll just review again. The sine function, it's the sine of some angle is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Okay, so if I give you a triangle like this, let's say, and let's say this is my theta, this is 30 degrees, okay, and let's say, of course, it's going to be a right triangle. So let's say that's 1, that's 2, and that's square root of 3. Oops, 3. So if I wanted to know the sine of 30 degrees, if 30 degrees is my angle that I'm looking at, what's the sine of 30 degrees? Well, it's just the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So the opposite side of 30 is this 1 over here, so he goes on top. Now, the hypotenuse is always going to be across from the 90-degree angle, whether we're looking at the 30 or whether we're looking at this angle over here. The hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, so he's going to go on the bottom. Okay, so what this tells us is that the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2, okay? And it should end up being a ratio or a fraction of some kind, because obviously opposite over hypotenuse, that's a ratio, so our answer should be, more often than not, a ratio. Just something to keep in mind, the trig function is just the sine of an angle, right? That angle can be anything. So if I'm looking at the same triangle, this is 30, this is 60, and my sides are still the same, so 1, square root of 3, and 2. Now, let's just say I wanted to know the sine of 60 degrees. Okay, well, the sine function is still opposite over hypotenuse, but this time I'm looking from a different angle. So this time the opposite side is really the square root of 3. And the hypotenuse doesn't change because, again, he's always across from the 90-degree angle, so that guy doesn't change. So the sine of 60 is going to be square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. The output of your sine function, or any of your trig functions, is going to depend on which angle you're looking at. So just be very careful to make sure you're focusing on the right angle. Okay, so the cosine function is going to be the same basic thing. So cosine of an angle is adjacent over hypotenuse, Okay, so if we use an example here, we'll use a 45, 45, 90 this time, just as an example. So this is 45, this is 45, okay. So if cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and let's say I'm doing the cosine of 45, obviously I can't do the cosine of 90, and we'll talk about that next week a little bit more. So I'll just look at the cosine of 45. Does it matter which angle I pick? No, it doesn't, because the adjacent side is the same, no matter which of the 45-degree angles I'm looking at. So no matter which one I use, my answer is going to be the adjacent side, which is 1, over the hypotenuse, which is square root of 2. So my answer is going to be 1 over the square root of 2. So cosine is pretty simple. All right, and last but not least, the tangent function. The tangent function, again, is the same basic procedure. We just set up our equation here. The tangent of an angle is equal to the opposite side over the adjacent side. If you can't remember the ratios of sides, whether it's opposite or adjacent or which one, I would recommend just keep your notes out as you do the activity. That way you can reference back if you can't remember, okay? So we'll do the same thing. We'll do a 30, 60, 90 this time. So here's 30, here's 60, okay? Okay, so if I want to know the tangent of both of these angles, let's say I want to know, let's start with the 30. The tangent of 30 is going to be the opposite side to 30 over the adjacent side to 30. Okay, well, the 30 has an opposite side of 1, because he's across from him, and an adjacent side of square root of 3. So this is 1 over the square root of 3. Now in this case, the hypotenuse doesn't come into play because it's the tangent function, and the tangent function doesn't actually use the hypotenuse. So, and that's okay. We don't need it for this problem. So now if we go to the other angle, the 60 degree, this is still the opposite over the adjacent, but now we're looking at the 60 degree guy. So if we switch colors here, so the opposite of 60 is the square root of 3, and the adjacent to 60 is 1. So if we do opposite over adjacent, this gives us the square root of 3 over 1. And you can simplify that and just say square root of 3, because obviously anything over 1 is just himself. So you don't necessarily have to put it over 1. Okay, so again, whether you're doing sine, cosine, or tangent, it's the same basic procedure as long as you know which sides you're looking at, whether it's opposite or adjacent or whatever. Okay, so now the question becomes, how do I know which one to use? So if I give you a triangle or a situation, whatever, and let's say, okay, obviously we know mentally we can look at this triangle and say, hey, that looks like it's going to be a 30, 60, 90, and so that x, that guy's got to be square root of 3. But let's say that you don't know whether or not it's the square root of 3, all right? Let's say you have to solve for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out a trig function that could help us find this. So first we're going to state what we're given. So we're given a 30-degree angle. We're given a side of 2, which is the hypotenuse. And we're given another leg. So we're given a hypotenuse of 2 and a leg that's 1. Okay. What we need to know is the leg that has value x. Okay, so basically what we want is we want a trig function that can relate what we need to something that we already have. Now we don't have to use all of these things, we can just use one of them, okay? But the fact that we have 2 sides to pick from, the hypotenuse and that other leg, gives us some choices as to how we want to solve this. So what I can do is I can say, okay, well, I know a trig function that relates one leg to the other leg, right? It's tangent, because the tangent of an angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, or the opposite over the adjacent, excuse me. And the opposite side and the adjacent side are always both legs, okay? So we can use tangent if we want. Now, we're of course going to use the tangent of 30 degrees, not only because that was given to us, but also because if we're going to do opposite over adjacent, well, the only thing that has an opposite side of 1 and an adjacent side of x is going to be that 30, which we're given. Okay, so opposite over adjacent gives me 1 over x. Okay, so now I have a ratio with one variable, and I can just solve for x. So this is where the calculator is going to come in handy. And make sure you use parentheses. Okay, also make sure your calculator is in degrees. Okay, since we're working in degrees here, make sure it's not in radians or gradians or anything like that. And I'll tell you how to do that on the next page. So the tangent of 30 degrees, oops, I don't want to do that. Tangent of 30 degrees. So I want to get the x by itself, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by x on both sides to get him out of the denominator. Okay, so those guys cancel, and what that gives me is x times the tangent of 30 is equal to 1. Okay, now x is still not by himself, we just got him out of the denominator, so to get him by himself, you just divide by the tangent of 30. Okay, and then I'm running out of room. And this gives me 1 over the tangent of 30. So basically, I'm just taking both sides of my equation, and I'm dividing by the tangent of 30, because what's going to happen is these guys are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with x is equal to 1 divided by the tangent of 30 degrees. Okay, so this is what I'm actually going to plug into my calculator. Now again, be very, very careful about parentheses, because if you don't use the right parentheses, it'll get you all messed up. Okay, so that's what I want to plug into the calculator. So again, the whole point of this is to say, okay, what's given to me, what do I need, and which one of my trig functions can relate those two things together, okay? So that's really all you're looking for. If you wanted to, you could also do the Pythagorean theorem for this, since you were given the hypotenuse, 2 of the 3 sides. But for these examples, for the activity, I'd like you to go ahead and use your trig functions, and you're only going to be required to use sine, cosine, and tangent. You're not going to have to use anything else. Okay, so using a calculator to find your trig functions. So if you have the Inspire, okay, which I think only first hour does, but if you have the Inspire, there's a little button that says document on the right hand side. So from your calculator page, wherever you're typing the stuff in, so from your calculator page, you want to click on Doc, okay? It's the button just below the button that says On. Okay, it says Document. Once you click on the Document button, it's going to bring up something that says like Document Settings, I believe. Document Settings. And then you want to click on the one that says Settings and Status, which I want to say is number 7. Settings and status. Okay, once you get to that menu, it'll bring up something that says, it'll bring up like a drop-down menu that'll say radians or gradians or degrees. You want to pick degrees. Okay, now make sure that you're in a calculator page for this. If you're trying to do this in the scratch pad, it's not going to work. So make sure you create a new document, you create a calculator page, and then you can actually change the settings. Okay, if you're doing this with the 84, I believe all you have to do is go to mode and then change to degrees. It's not very difficult. It's definitely a lot less steps. But the moral of the story is that you want to make sure your calculator is in degrees before you do any of these calculations. Okay, so just a few notes about the assignment for today. You need to show all of your calculations. Okay, so you need to show the calculations for sine, cosine, and tangent. All right, you need to show how you got to those ratios. You need to draw your triangles, whatever, show all of your work basically is what you need to do. You're only going to use the triangles that I provided to you. Now, I cut out some little triangles. They're not perfect, but basically you're going to round to the nearest tens. So if it looks like it's about 68, you're going to round to 70, okay? But only use the triangles that I provided to fill in that table. And then the worksheets due at the end of the hour no matter what. Okay, so you have to get that worksheet in, obviously with the exception of Jamar, Maria, and Fanda. You guys know who you are, okay? So, and your notes are also due at the end of the hour. Now, just a reminder, if you have any questions, I'm going to post this video on the blog, so you have access to it. I'm also going to post the solution video and the worksheets, okay? All right, good luck, guys, and please be on your best behavior, and I hope you enjoy the activity. Okay, bye.